I remember the exact moment everything began to shift. It wasn't sudden, not a violent crack or crash, but a subtle slide, like the dimming of a light, too faint to notice at first, yet steady. If anyone ever asked me, "Amelia, when did you realize you were the extra in your own family?" I wouldn't respond immediately. How could a 6-year-old comprehend the quiet suffocation of being replaced? But I do remember that day, the day Andrew was born. Before him, I was the center of their world. Our little house in Seattle hummed with an easy kind of peace every night. My dad, with his voice rich in warmth, would read me grim fairy tales while my mom gently braided my hair, whispering dreams of far-off places. I was their little girl, the one they could never get enough of. On weekends, my dad would lift me onto his shoulders, and together we'd walk to a live beach where we'd search for seashells that sparkled like treasures in the sand. My drawings, little more than scribbles of color and shape, graced our fridge, my private gallery, where I was the artist of the hour. They were my proudest creations, the simple brushstrokes of a child's world, yet to them they were like rare masterpieces. I was seen. I was important. Then came Andrew, and with him, the subtle erosion of everything I had known. The birthday I'll never forget. 7 years old, and for months I had wished fervently, and with childlike determination, for a red bicycle. A small one, just enough to glide through our quiet neighborhood, feeling the breeze through my hair. My room became a shrine to that bike, pictures of it taped to my door beside my bed, even tucked into my mom's wallet. When the day came, I tore into the wrapping paper with a pulse of anticipation. But the gifts I found were dresses and beginner readers. I remember the hollow feeling as I asked my mom about the bike, her reply soft and dismissive. "Honey, bicycles are expensive. You don't need one yet. Walking is good for you." It wasn't jealousy that churned in my chest. It was a cold realization. A freezing certainty that I had been relegated to the background of their lives. Just 3 weeks later, they bought Andrew a tricycle. No special occasion, just because. And my mom, in the same tone, had said Andrew needs more exercise to strengthen his legs. I stood at the window, watching my father crouch down to teach Andrew how to ride. The warmth between them was a stark contrast to the chill in my bones. It wasn't envy. It was more profound than that. I had never even been considered. I existed, yes, but only in the periphery. That was just the beginning. The moment I realized it, when I earned the highest English score in class, rushing home to show my parents only to be met with a glance and a "good job, sweetheart," it was never enough. The excitement in their voices when they talked about Andrew's achievements was endless, and they were so small. A rabbit made out of blocks, like he had solved some great mystery of the universe. My grades, just an expectation. A minor footnote. I tried once at 9 to tell my mom how it felt. How empty I was, always waiting for that moment when she'd look at me the way she looked at Andrew, with pride in her eyes. But the words I poured out only bounced off her. "You're the older sister. You're supposed to set an example. Don't fuss over little things." I said nothing. All of it, the joy, the sadness, the hurt, was sealed away in that invisible box inside me. The more I tried, the more I disappeared. As the years passed, the imbalance only deepened. Andrew was allowed to be messy, selfish, loud. His every mistake was shrugged off with a smile. But me, I was supposed to understand, to be patient, to be the shadow behind the family's golden boy. My role had been set, and I was too young to fight back. But even at 14, I had already begun to numb myself. I was already becoming invisible. My part-time job at the bookstore on Fremont Avenue felt like my escape. It was nothing glamorous, just a small, dusty store where I stacked books and dusted shelves. But to me, it was freedom. It was something that was mine. The quiet pride of earning my own money, imagining what I could buy with it, maybe a camera or a nice pair of headphones. But those dreams were short-lived. One evening after work, my mother called me into the living room. Her voice was syrupy sweet in that familiar, dangerous way. "Amelia, your father and I have talked. It's good that you're earning money, but as the older sister, you should learn to share with Andrew. He wants swimming lessons, but the fees are high. Starting this month, you'll give him half of your wages." I froze. I had worked for that money. "But, Mom, I can help him. I can teach him at the public pool for free." She tilted her head, her gaze hardening. "Don't be selfish, Amelia. You should be proud to support your brother." In that moment, I realized something cold, something sharp the world expected me to give, without ever asking what was left for me. I stood there silent, staring at the price tag of my childhood. The words echoed in my mind, relentless, like the endless tick of a clock I couldn't stop. "If you keep holding on to this narrow mindset, you'll never learn what it means to sacrifice." I wanted to argue, to shout, to expose the unfairness, but I knew that doing so would only drag me deeper into the hole. So I nodded my heart, sinking a hollow echo in my chest. The weight of those words wasn't just in the sentence itself. It was the unspoken expectation that sacrifice was my duty, that my dreams and desires were secondary, irrelevant even. From that day on, every month, I handed over a thick envelope, half of what I earned, my hard-earned money, supposedly for Andrew's swimming lessons. But instead of swimming, I watched him waste my contributions on video games, new headphones, designer sneakers. My parents never once stopped him, never even questioned how he spent it. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It became routine, a constant. Andrew took everything. My things, my iPod, my first leather jacket, the one I had bought with money I had scraped together. And one day I caught him bragging about that jacket at school, wearing it like a prize, grinning as if it was something he'd earned. When I confronted him, I saw my father's eyes, distant and dismissive. "He's still young, Amelia. He doesn't think things through like you do. You, as his older sister, should understand." That word, understanding, began to feel like a curse. Each time I heard it, a little piece of my soul shriveled. The more I worked to be independent, the more they used it to pile expectations onto me. Every step I took forward became another reason to take from me, to sacrifice for Andrew, the golden child who could do no wrong in their eyes. To them, I was just an accessory to his brilliance, a background character whose sole purpose was to prop him up, to fill the gaps where he failed to make up for the things he lacked. I used to think things might change when I grew up. Maybe then I thought my worth would be recognized. But deep down, I knew the truth. In this house, my role had been etched long before I was born, and the wounds, though invisible, ached more with every passing day. By 17, I was numb. Numb to the hollow praise my parents heaped on Andrew. At Roosevelt High, I was ranked in the top 3 of my class. I worked 3 nights a week at the bookstore and took freelance graphic design jobs on weekends, all while saving for my biggest dream, a semi-professional camera. Photography was the only place where I felt truly seen. The lens of my camera was the one place where I wasn't defined by Andrew's shadow, where I wasn't anyone's other. I was just Amelia, whole and complete. Every dollar I earned went into a tin box hidden deep in my desk drawer. It was my secret, my dream, safe, untouched, or so I thought. One late evening in March, after a long shift, I came home to find the drawer ajar, the tin box missing. My palms went cold, though Seattle's mild weather did nothing to explain the chill that gripped me. My room, once my sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. I tore through it, desperately searching, but found nothing except the laughter coming from the living room. And then I heard the words that stopped my heart cold. "I told you Andrew should learn to be self-reliant. He saved up and bought himself new streaming gear." Such dedication deserves praise. My mother's voice trailed off casual, as if it were nothing. New streaming gear. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I realized what had happened. It was my money, the money I had worked for. My eyes darted to the living room, and there he sat. Andrew grinning proudly, showing off his new setup. My setup? That was my money, I said, my voice unsteady. You took my tin box, didn't you? He didn't even look up, shrugging casually as if he were entitled to it. You can earn it back. It's not like you're doing anything meaningful with those stupid photos anyway. I stood there dumbfounded, staring at him. But when I turned to my parents, I found no help, no justice. Just their cold indifference. My mother sighed, shaking her head. Amelia hiding money in your room was irresponsible. You should have given it to us for safekeeping. Then she added with a finality that cut through me. Andrew needs the equipment to pursue his interests. As his sister, you should support him. My father, his voice flat and emotionless, chimed in. Money is just a tool. What matters is that family shares with each other. Share. No, this wasn't sharing. This was theft disguised as family duty. My chest tightened, the weight of the injustice unbearable. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in the dark, the familiar weight of disappointment pressing down on me. Instead of tears, I turned to my laptop, fingers cold, as I searched for a new job. The bookstore wasn't enough anymore. Freelance jobs didn't pay enough. I needed something more. I applied to be an assistant at a local wedding photography studio. The work was grueling, setting up props, cleaning, editing hundreds of photos late into the night. But it didn't matter. This time, it wasn't for them. It was for me. It was a slow, deliberate escape, each step further into the life I had fought so hard to build for myself. The days blurred into one another, work by day, freelancing by night, and on weekends, anything I could get my hands on to earn more. The routine was my fortress, and the longer I stayed in it, the less I cared about the hollow laughter echoing from the living room about the gadgets Andrew flaunted like trophies, or about the way my parents pretended to not notice the empty spaces between us. Every evening, as I closed the door to the studio behind me, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders, knowing I was slowly getting closer to the world I had chosen, the one no one could take from me. I was building it from the ground up, piece by piece alone, but for the first time, whole. And then came the day I turned 18. The decision had already been made quietly in the recesses of my mind. I didn't need a celebration, a farewell, or anyone's approval. Just a quiet Saturday morning, while the house was still asleep, I packed my things, a small bag, and the keys to a rented room in Capitol Hill, and I left. Not a word, not a glance. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind me, and the silence that followed. I didn't look back, not even when I heard nothing from them. No one stopped me. No one even asked where I was going. In the years that followed, I buried myself in work. I didn't just need the money. I needed the validation. Every photograph I took, every freelance job was a step further into my independence. It wasn't just about the camera, though. It was about the power to choose. The power to be seen not as Andrew's sister, but as Amelia. The turning point came when I participated in a local photography exhibition. It was small, nothing extravagant, but it felt like my moment. The day Jake found me there was unremarkable at first. He was just another observer quietly studying my work. No pretensions, no critiques. He simply nodded, then smiled, his words lingering in the air. You make this city look like it's breathing. I don't think I fully understood what he meant at the time, but it stuck with me. We exchanged numbers, and from that point on, Jake started to become a part of my life. slowly, quietly, with the kind of patience I never knew existed. He was warm, a calm contrast to the cold indifference I had grown accustomed to. He wasn't asking for anything from me. There was no competition, no comparison to Andrew, no shadows to hide in. He simply saw me, and that in itself was enough. Jake came from a family that felt like something out of a movie, a family that actually talked, not just exchanged pleasantries. At Thanksgiving, when I visited for the first time, his mother hugged me at the door. No probing questions about my grades or income. She simply asked, "Did you have a tiring trip, sweetheart?" I had never been asked something like that before. No judgment, no expectations, just genuine care. I almost cried. 3 years later, on a snowy winter evening, Jake knelt in front of me under the soft glow of an amber streetlight. He handed me a simple silver ring. "Amelia, I don't want you to just stand behind the camera," he said softly. "I want you to walk through life with me in every real frame." It was an easy decision for me. No hesitation, no doubts. But deep down, I knew happiness never came easily for me. It had always been too complicated, too wrapped up in them. The moment we announced our wedding, though, everything came crashing back. My family found out quickly. Less than a week later, my mother called. Her voice was not sweet this time. It was sharp, direct, cold. "If you plan on abandoning your family on such an important day, I'll have to reconsider the inheritance. Andrew will be named the primary heir." I scoffed, almost laughed. Inheritance? An old house still under mortgage. A car that was barely worth anything. Or maybe the mountain of debt Andrew had piled up through his reckless behavior. But they thought this would affect me. They thought I still craved their approval, that I still longed for a place in the tiny world where they had kept me locked for so many years. The next day, Andrew's texts started flooding my phone. "You are so ungrateful. Mom and Dad raised you, and now you're planning to make them a laughingstock in front of everyone. A wedding without family. What a joke." Or maybe that's your thing, playing the victim for pity points. I didn't respond. The phone buzzed with their venom, their condemnation, their attempts to pull me back into their twisted version of family. Even a few old friends reached out, well-meaning, their messages filled with the same empty rhetoric: "Family's still family. If you can forgive, you should. Your wedding's supposed to be a happy day. Don't let stubbornness become regret." I understood. They hadn't lived in that house. They didn't know what it was like to be ground down piece by piece until there was nothing left but the shell of a person. Jake sat beside me through those nights, holding my hand in silence. "We'll only invite those who truly love you," he said, his words simple but resolute. That was when I knew I wasn't going back. The family I had known was never really family. They were just people tied to me by blood. And blood didn't mean love. I wasn't going to let them take one more piece of me. 1 week before sending out the wedding invitations, I got another message from my mother. "Family needs to talk. Not over the phone, and definitely not through outsiders." I knew what she meant. Outsiders meant Jake. They had never seen him as part of my life, and they never would. But I had already decided. I had nothing left to say to them. Jake's gentle suggestion to accompany me to the meeting echoed in my mind like a quiet, grounding force. "If you feel you need to say it all once, I'll go with you, but only this once." And so that Saturday morning, we found ourselves in a small cafe in Ballard, far enough from the bustling downtown to escape the prying eyes of familiar faces, quiet enough for every word to matter. My mother arrived first, impeccably dressed. Her makeup flawless, but the weight in her eyes told a different story, a heaviness that no amount of powder could mask. Then came my father, wearing his worn-out suit, holding on to some vestige of dignity, even though time had softened him, made him seem smaller somehow. Finally, Andrew slouched in the picture of indifference, his hoodie wrinkled and his headphones hanging loosely around his neck. He barely looked up, as if he couldn't care less about the gravity of the moment. No one ordered anything. Mother spoke first, her voice laced with reproach and a silent plea. "Amelia, I don't understand why you would cut off your own family on what should be the happiest day of your life." Her words dripped with disappointment, but they didn't move me anymore. I kept my composure, hands tightly clasped under the table. "Because I want that day to truly be happy," I said, my voice calm but firm. Dad's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "You're turning yourself into a stranger to your own family." Jake's hand on my back was steady, reassuring. It was a silent reminder, just tell the truth. And so I did. I spoke of every time I had been dismissed, every dollar I had handed over to Andrew for his whims. I spoke of the camera, my dream, my reward for years of hard work taken from me and turned into Andrew's latest gaming setup. I reminded them of the hollow feeling I had when my every achievement was brushed aside in favor of his minor victories. Mom didn't look up from the napkin she was twisting in her hands. Dad stared out the window, as if the words spoken had no real meaning to him. Only Andrew broke the silence. His words were sharp, slicing through the air, with a cold honesty that shocked me. "Yes, she's right. I took that camera not just because I wanted it, but because I hated how she always made me feel small." The confession, if it could even be called that, didn't surprise me. I had been waiting for it, hoping for it, but even now when it came, it still hit me with the force of a train. Andrew sneered, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. "You think being top of the class, handling everything yourself, makes you so great? You have no idea what it's like to always be compared to always fall short." He leaned forward, his words spitting with resentment. "Everything comes easier for you." I stood, the silence thick around me, but before I could leave, my mother's voice called me back. "Andrew's still young. He's just confused." But Andrew was 24. This wasn't confusion. This was manipulation, and it was the story they had been selling me for years. I had had enough. I stood taller, dragging the silence behind me like a heavy cloak. But before I could say another word, Dad's voice broke through, flat and transactional. "If it's just about money, your mother and I are willing to cover all the wedding expenses. Consider it an apology." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "My wedding isn't something to be bought in exchange for silence, Dad. I don't need anyone's money but my own." Andrew slammed his chair back so hard it rattled the table. "Fine. Keep hiding in your little bubble of independence. By the time you realize family's what really matters, it'll be too late." His words didn't hurt anymore. They were empty now, just the noise of someone too desperate to be understood. I walked out of that cafe, leaving behind people who once called themselves family, and a truth I had long been too afraid to accept. Some bonds, no matter how close, by blood, can't be healed with apologies that come too late. But I was wrong in thinking that meeting would be the end of it. 3 days later, she showed up unannounced, immaculately dressed eyes, red as if the weight of my defection had driven her to the brink of despair. Standing in front of the studio where I worked, clutching her leather bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright, my mother didn't ask for permission. She simply stood there, blocking the entrance. "Amelia, come out here so we can talk." I didn't flinch. "I'm busy with work. You can leave a message." But she didn't move. Not an inch. "You can't keep running away like this. We're family. I stepped forward, keeping just enough distance between us so she couldn't touch me. Family isn't an excuse to disrespect someone, Mom. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me. They were pretending to stay focused, but the glances were impossible to ignore. My manager, looking concerned, shot me a look. I knew what I had to do. You should leave. If you don't, I'll have to call security. For the first time, I saw her hesitate, visibly shaken. She turned her back to me and walked away. I knew this wasn't over. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about power control and their need to keep me in their world on their terms. But for the first time in my life, I had drawn a line. That night, my phone exploded with calls. Relatives, aunts, cousins, all with their own opinions, their own advice. Don't do something you'll regret when you're older. She's still your mother. Families fight, but a wedding should have everyone there. I understood them even if they didn't understand me. They hadn't lived in my house, hadn't felt the weight of my family's disregard every single day. They had no idea what it was like to be suffocated by the very people who should have loved you the most. Jake sat quietly beside me that night, his hand in mine a reminder of what love really looked like. We'll only invite those who truly love you, he said, simple and true. And I knew then, with certainty, that I wouldn't back down this time. The world I had built was mine to protect, and I wouldn't let anyone, no matter how close they were, take it from me again. Andrew's voice crackled through the phone, his words dripping with mockery. You know I made a bet with my friends wondering if you'd actually dare have that wedding without Mom and Dad. Can't wait to see it. He'll show up to celebrate with you. For real. I didn't respond, but Jake did his message sharp and to the point. Tomorrow, we're changing every password for the wedding services, and we're hiring security for the big day. With that, we began fortifying every aspect of the preparations. The guest list was carefully scrutinized. Every vendor was instructed to confirm any changes directly with either Jake or me. I knew my parents wouldn't accept being excluded, and I was right. 1 week later, the banquet manager called, confusion thick in her voice. Amelia, someone claiming to be your father, just requested a change to the seating chart. He said there must be a head table for your family and asked to add 10 more guests. I thanked her, reminding her that the password system was in place that they wouldn't get through. But what really sent a chill down my spine was my mother's message arriving seconds later. If you want everyone to see you as an ungrateful daughter, I'll make sure you succeed. I didn't reply. I didn't cry either. Instead, Jake and I worked quickly, adding an additional layer of security for the wedding. He didn't need to say anything more. His steady, calm gaze reminded me that I wasn't facing them alone anymore. Some close friends expressed their concerns. They're doing this because they care about you. Amelia, don't be too harsh. I stayed silent. There were things outsiders would never understand, and they didn't need to. 5 days before the wedding, every morning began with new messages from Andrew, mocking, insulting, demanding. My parents had switched to emails attaching old family photos as if those images could patch the years of hurt. But all I felt was relief. For the first time, I was living for myself. 3 days before the wedding, an unexpected call came from Madison, an old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Amelia, there's something... I'm not sure if I should bring this up, but lately I've seen some posts about you on Facebook. Are you okay? I frowned. What do you mean? Madison hesitated. They're saying you're having a mental breakdown, overwhelmed with wedding stress, acting irrational, that your family's so worried, but you've cut them off. I didn't need to ask who they were. I opened Facebook, my heart sinking. I had unfollowed most of my family long ago. But when I checked my mother's account, the posts appeared immediately. The most painful thing isn't being rejected by your own child, but watching them spiral out of control and being powerless to help. praying Amelia finds herself again before it's too late. Beneath that post were hundreds of sympathetic comments, words of encouragement all directed at them. No one asked why I had chosen silence. The truth didn't matter to them. Jake walked in, then phone in hand, his expression calm but firm. Andrew just called the church venue. He claimed to be your brother, trying to add 30 seats for your extended family. I froze. This was the line they had crossed. Fortunately, the staff at the venue had already checked with me first. Jake sat next to me, opening his laptop, reviewing every vendor account. We need to be ready for the worst. If they're bold enough to impersonate you, they won't hesitate to show up and cause a scene. That night, we held an emergency meeting with the security team. What had once been standard wedding security was now upgraded to fortress-level protection. QR codes for guest check-ins, internal security covering every section of the venue, a rapid response team on standby for any unexpected disruptions. I didn't want my wedding to become a battlefield, but I wouldn't allow anyone to ruin it. Not now. Not after everything. The very next morning, an anonymous email arrived, its subject line cold and accusing, "Family is forever." The message was brief, but it hit like a stone. Who do you think you are to deny the very people who gave you this life? It would be such a shame if your wedding became the talk of the town because of your blatant ungratefulness. Attached to the email was a photo of Jake and me at a wedding dress fitting, taken from a distance without our knowledge. I felt a wave of cold dread wash over me. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was a war they would stop at nothing to win. But as the weight of their cruelty bore down on me, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I immediately forwarded the email to Jake, my fingers shaking slightly as I pressed send. His response was simple: "I'm handling it this afternoon." I didn't need anything more from him. Jake's lawyer reached out later that day, informing me that papers were already prepared to request a restraining order. If my family attempted any harassment on the wedding day, any sign of trespassing, disruption, or defamation would trigger immediate legal action. Jake didn't say much, but every action he took made me feel safer than any words of comfort ever could. The night before the wedding, I sat on the balcony watching Seattle bathe in cold yellow lights. The city hummed with its usual noise, but I felt a silence between me and the rest of the world. My family's silence. No congratulations, no messages asking how I was. Instead, I scrolled through the same tired narrative: she's bringing this on herself. Poor parents suffering because of her stubbornness. I read them, but didn't react. Explanations would change nothing. People believe what they want to believe. The wedding day arrived, and Seattle wore a rare, gentle kind of weather, neither blazing hot nor pouring rain, as if it had chosen to side with me for once. The garden venue just outside the city gleamed with fresh greenery, ribbons of white gently fluttering in the breeze. I stepped out of the car, carefully holding my wedding dress, my heart surprisingly calm. Jake had arrived early to oversee everything, and his friends and family were already there, their faces glowing with joy. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to handle every detail alone. But then the head of security approached me with a serious expression. "Miss Amelia, they've arrived." I didn't need to ask who. My parents and Andrew stood at the main gate, dressed as if they'd been invited. Dad wore his old suit from my uncle's wedding last year, while Mom donned her usual special occasion teal silk dress. Andrew, however, was different: hoodie, backward cap, his usual defiance radiating from him. I could hear my mother's voice from a distance, sharp and demanding. "We are the bride's family. No one has the right to keep us out." The security manager looked at me, waiting for my instructions. Jake stood beside me, unwavering, his presence a quiet strength. "It's your call, Amelia. Just remember, today is your day, not theirs." I nodded. "Stick to the plan. They're not on the list. No entry." The security team executed flawlessly. Dad tried intimidation, his voice raising in anger. Mom switched to theatrics, her voice rising to draw attention. Andrew hung back, arms crossed, throwing loud, snide remarks for anyone nearby to hear. Look at her earns a little money and suddenly forgets who she is. But this time, their judgments, their insults, their stares no longer touched me. They were outside. I was standing in my own moment. I turned away from the gate, walking toward the venue. The string quartet began to play. I walked down the aisle, covered in white petals, each step lighter than the last, not because of the dress, not because of the eyes watching, but because I had finally let go of the heaviest burden. The impossible expectations of those who should have loved me most were no longer my chains. At the end of the aisle, Jake stood waiting, his smile steady, his presence my anchor. In that moment, I realized something that had eluded me for years. I had been running after validation from a door that was never going to open. Today, I no longer needed it to. I had opened my own door and stepped through it. The ceremony was perfect. No disruptions, no surprises. Everyone who truly loved me was there witnessing, celebrating. No one mentioned duties. No one lectured me on what family should be. When the announcer said, "I'm honored to present for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Jake and Amelia," the applause roared like a wave outside the security perimeter. My parents remained standing cold and unmoving. Andrew had vanished at some point. They stared, frozen like strangers lost in a place that was once theirs. But I didn't walk over to them, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I knew. Some doors, once you close them yourself, mean you're finally ready to walk forward, no matter who's standing behind. I held Jake's hand tightly, and we left the ceremony, the music still echoing behind us. That evening, after the wedding, Jake and I sat together on the rooftop of a small hotel in Bainbridge Island. From there, we could see the twinkling lights of Seattle in the distance. This time, they no longer made me feel alone. Jake's family gathered downstairs, still laughing and chatting. I felt a quiet peace, a sense of belonging in a world that had once seemed so foreign. For the first time, I was home. Amelia's journey wasn't just about a wedding without her biological family. It was about the quiet but powerful act of reclaiming her life. And though the day was spent surrounded by those who had learned to truly see her Jake's family warm and unpretentious, there was still that shadow. The emails, the messages, the endless attempts to pull her back into the suffocating role they had carved for her. But when Andrew's voice crackled through her phone, in a message she'd never expected, everything stopped for a second. He acknowledged what he'd done to her, the camera, the cruel words, the need to feel less pathetic. He said he was in therapy now, trying to make a life of his own. For the first time, Andrew admitted to what he had been hiding for so long, his jealousy, his resentment. He sent a simple message with no expectation of forgiveness, just an admission of guilt. I read his words slowly, the weight of them sinking in, and I could almost feel the moment the old anger would have stirred. But this time, there was no anger, just a quiet clarity. Some apologies come too late, not because people don't know they're wrong, but because they never had the courage to admit it when it still mattered. Without hesitation, I blocked Andrew, then my mother, finally, my father. It wasn't an act of cold severance, it was liberation. Pressing block felt lighter than I could have imagined. No more emails, no more calls in the middle of the night filled with scolding guilt or empty pleas. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about peace, a peace I had earned. The next morning, Jake and I left Seattle. There were no farewells, no final tearful goodbyes, just the quiet relief of stepping away. We went to a small coastal town in Oregon where no one knew our names, no one asked about our past. Just simple, easy conversations with strangers on the street, and mornings spent walking hand in hand along the beach. It was there, in the quiet of a new beginning, that I realized I had spent so many years trying to live up to others' expectations. My family's expectations, society's expectations, and for what? To be seen as worthy to earn love. I had finally started to live for myself. Jake never pressed me to talk about my past. He just held my hand steady and firm every time I needed it. On the third afternoon in Santorini, while we sat under the trellis of bougainvillea at a small seaside cafe, he said, "I know you're not one to talk much about feelings, but today I want you to hold on to this moment, not for me, for yourself." I looked at him, words unspoken swirling around me, but in the end, I knew exactly what to say. I used to think happiness meant making everyone else happy, being good enough, working hard enough to be recognized. I paused, squeezing his hand. But it turns out happiness comes from knowing how to say no to people who don't know how to value you. Jake didn't speak. The smile in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. We spent the rest of our time in Santorini laughing, exploring living in a world that felt lighter, simpler. When we returned to Seattle, I cleared out every connection that tied me to my past. It wasn't about denying my roots, but about making space for the life I had chosen. That camera, my camera, was the one I had earned with my own hard work. I didn't look at it with anger or regret anymore. I looked at it with pride. It was a symbol of my strength, of my courage to let go of the things that no longer served me. The Amelia of today was living her true self, finally free from the expectations of others. And that, I realized, was the most powerful kind of freedom. Boundaries, I learned, aren't about cutting people off with hatred. They're about protecting your peace and your self-worth. Everyone has the right to choose who will walk with them on the important roads of life. And just like Amelia, sometimes happiness begins when you finally say no to the things that have held you back for too long. What do you think about Amelia's journey? Was she right to choose her own happiness? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about family and life.